Thank you very much for joining. This is episode 2 of Utah State of Mind. I am your host, Jim Spiewak. Today we're going to talk about suicide. According to the Utah Department of Health, suicide is the 8th leading cause of death for Utahns, with an average of 657 suicides each year. The Utah suicide rate is consistently higher than the national rate, and research is showing that men are more at risk of dying by suicide than women. However, women are more likely to attempt suicide. And with those types of statistics that are really sobering, we wanted to talk about this issue a little bit more. And in today's episode, the theme is we're going to talk about things that are uncomfortable. And we do have a guest with us today that is comfortable talking about things that are uncomfortable. I would like to welcome in Dani Bates. Dani, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. So your family has been greatly impacted by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And so first and foremost, we just want to send our thoughts, which I'm sure you hear a lot, but it's true. We're very sorry for what you and your family have gone through. But you take, I think, probably a different approach than a lot of people that have or experience a suicide in the family. So I guess let's just talk a little bit about what happened with you and your husband and your family.
Okay.
If so, tell me about Denny. Denny was your husband.
Yep.
And when did you meet Denny?
I met him, I had just been through a really volatile 1-year marriage and got divorced. And then I met him within months. And we just hit it off really fast. I met him online dating, and he was a complete weirdo and, seriously the strangest person you've ever met in your life.
What kind of weird? Give me one example of a weirdo thing.
He was so smart that he went on Family Feud. He could have been like a Jeopardy contestant. He also was like a Star Trek guy, but he was also very into sports. He loved the Cubs.
A Renaissance man.
Yes, very much so. And he was like a car salesman, but only a little bit creepy, not super creepy.
Okay. All right.
He was 5'4", had this massive beard. He was like a Ron Swanson type from Parks and Recreation, if you know what I mean.
Oh, sure.
Just very much like that, and just very strange and weird sense of humor, and I loved it.
What drew you to him? His sense of humor is what you just said right there?
I think his sense of humor and his confidence in himself, in his weirdness and how he was so unique. He wouldn't call it weird, but he was just his uniqueness. He was so confident in it, and he knew what he was good at and what he wasn't good at, and he was okay with it, and I loved that he just was so sure of who he was.
Yeah, so you two meet, and things move along pretty quickly, right?
Yep, we get married within 9 months of meeting. So, yeah, we were ready to just have babies and do the whole thing. He was 30, which is ancient for Utah to get married. So, yeah.
Okay, so you knew it was right, and that's the thing I think is in society there are these stigmas and these norms that people feel like they have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't care about any of that, did you?
Mm-mm. No,
and so
neither of us
it's
did.
like if it feels right, if we know it's right, let's do this.
Yep.
Yeah. So you start to have a family.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your children.
So we had our first daughter, Winnie, in 2016, and she is the most sunshine, the happiest, easiest baby you've ever met in your life. She was so sweet and just happy all the time. I thought I was the best parent in the world, but she was just a really easy kid.
Yeah.
And then in 2018, 2 years later, we had my daughter Piper, who was the feistiest, sassiest baby you've ever met in your life. So we called her a grumpy old man in a baby girl's body because she was just feisty. So they're complete opposites, but perfectly balance each other out, and they're both amazing.
So we've heard a little bit about Denny. We've heard a little bit about your two daughters. Tell us about Dani.
About me?
Yeah, I mean, you tell us about your interests, and have you struggled with some mental illness of your own as well, if you would share some of that?
Yeah, I have struggled with OCD since I was, as long as I can remember, since I was a little baby. I was adopted at birth, but had a great childhood with my adoptive parents. and really healthy upbringing, and I still had OCD, and I really believe I was just born with it. I just came that way, and I have struggled with it all my life and didn't get diagnosed until I was, in my mid-20s. And I went on a LDS mission in 2010 and came home after like 2.5 months, just really struggling. And that's when I started to figure out, I've been struggling with anxiety and OCD and some depression for years, and I just never had it fully diagnosed and dealt with.
Did you sort of need that diagnosis to, because from what I know about you, you're very open and honest about basically everything.
Yeah, too much sometimes.
Have you always been that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and how come? Because a lot of times in society, people like to have this mask up.
Yeah.
They like to have this false front, but internally they are really struggling.
Yeah.
Any idea, have you thought about why is that just your personality? You've always been that way?
I think it's partially my personality. I think part of it is my OCD and anxiety. I feel like if I can get it out, I can deal with it better. And if I tell people, I get the support I need. And I have learned from very early on that when I talk about things, it helps other people. And so that helps me. You know what I mean? So I don't know, I've just always been, my aunt said that my family was very conservative growing up and would like to really not talk about hard things. And my aunt has said that they would always call me to get the real story because my mom would put it down a little bit, minimize it a little bit. So they were like, let's ask Dani what really happened. Even from when I was a little kid, I would just be very open and honest.
Right, get the truth from Dani.
Yeah.
Would you characterize it as not having a filter, or would you characterize it as just being an open book?
I think it's both. I think it gets me in trouble sometimes because I don't have a filter, but I think that I like being open because I think it helps people understand me. It helps me understand other people. It helps other people feel safe with me. I have people out of the blue tell me their deepest, darkest, craziest secrets and traumas because they know that I'm a safe person because I'm so open and honest. And, I think.
Yeah. So if you're so open and honest to do a lot of the talking, what about the flip side? What about the listening? How important is the listening side when someone is ready to open up?
It's so important. And I think when you talk about your own issues, it makes it easier for other people to open up. And then you have to really hear them because a lot of people aren't like me and just say it exactly like it is. They sneak it into their words and try. Sometimes they're screaming for help, but not really saying that they need help.
Right, sure. So let's talk about Denny a little bit more. Was Denny always struggling with his mental health? Was he working on it? What can you tell us about Denny?
So he was very abused as a child in every way imaginable, and he struggled with depression early on. I remember him telling me that he was put on antidepressants at 5 years old because it was so severe, which is really rare for a child that young to be on medication for that. So, but he was saying things like, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be alive, which is, passively.
At 5 years old?
Passively suicidal. And he just really struggled. He was never diagnosed with OCD. Now looking back, it's very clear he struggled with OCD during his life too, just in a very different way than there's all different kinds of OCD. And he struggled with depression, he struggled with suicidality, he struggled with alcoholism. By the time I met him, he'd been sober for several years and was really working on himself. But he still had pretty severe eating disorder, and he would get very obsessed with the gym. So he'd be really just extreme in things. He was either spending zero money, or he was blowing tons of money, or he was not working out at all, or he was working out 7 days a week, 2 times a day, very extreme. And so by the time he died, he was doing better than he had ever done in his entire life. He was eating balanced, normal meals, eating a treat when he wanted to. He was going to the gym 3-4 times a week for 45 minutes, just very normal. He would look for deals, but would also spend money on a fun vacation every once in a while. He really found balance those couple of years. I think being married and then having his girls was motivation for him to really figure it out.
Do you ever think about what you just explained right there, how it seemed like he had such great balance there at the end.
Yeah.
But it was the end.
Yep.
Do you think about that?
Yeah, it's strange because a lot of people are like, well, was he planning it? Did it? And I know he wasn't planning it. But I do believe that before I met him, he had severe suicidality a lot throughout his life. And so I think when we had a traumatic moment where we found out about a family member being abused, it just clicked for him and he went straight to suicidal, where he hadn't been, that as far as I was aware of, he had not struggled with any of that. And then that last week, he was not himself. He wasn't sleeping, he wasn't eating, and just turned into a different person all of a sudden.
And so are you pretty confident that that was the thing for Denny that pushed him sort of over that that point to do that?
Yeah, I think seeing the abuse that was rampant in his family, the abuse that was rampant in my extended family, and he was like, well, I'm going to turn into a monster someday too. I'm destined to. If all these men we both know have turned into monsters, then why wouldn't I turn into a monster?
Right.
And I think with not sleeping and eating, his brain wasn't working right. And he took that so seriously, even though it would have been so easy to just sit down with me and be like, no, of course you're not going to turn into a monster. You're the best dad ever. Like, but
right.
he wasn't able to open up about that.
This speaks to the whole theme of this particular podcast that we're doing today. I'm going to be brutally honest with you and say that I feel a little uncomfortable asking you some of these questions.
Yeah.
I'm asking you, though, because from everything that I know about you and I've seen you in the public sphere before, you are comfortable and okay talking about this.
Yeah, I've made an effort to make sure that suicide isn't a swear word in my home. Like I always say that suicide is the same as cancer. My mom died of cancer, my husband died of suicide. It's an illness. And I know that's uncomfortable for people because suicide has been a word that we whisper. And it still even is like, I get in trouble on social media platforms for saying it too much when I talk about it, even though I'm being educational and helping people find resources, because it's such a taboo word.
And we're going to get into your advocacy work and some of the things that you have put out there in social media. That's one of the big reasons why I wanted to bring you in, and then, of course, share all these resources as well. Mm-hmm. Do you get that a lot, of some version of what I just said? Because I feel like in society, we don't talk about it a lot. We do shield ourselves from it. Am I hearing you correct in saying, let's talk about it in an intelligent, sophisticated way?
Yep.
It doesn't have to be, like you said, a swear word.
It's not scary or bad. Of course, it's a terrible thing that happened. But so is cancer, and we talk about cancer all the time. So is diabetes, and we talk about diabetes all the time. Why is suicide so taboo? There is nothing different. It's just that it's in your brain instead of your kidneys or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I don't understand the why society deems it as so taboo. And when I do talk to people who are uncomfortable, they often get very emotional because it's so uncomfortable for them. And so I think it's really good to push people to deal with that discomfort and push through it, because that's the only way we're going to help people.
Wow. I just mentioned to you that I've spent the last 4 years consistently reporting on substance use disorder. And I say that to people all the time after I learned a lot more about it and reported on it for a little while, was society stigmatizes people with substance use disorder and call them an addict or a junkie. But they don't stigmatize someone that has heart disease or someone that's diabetic. And I would sit there and say the same thing about substance use disorder, what you just said about suicide.
100%.
And I think that that's important to open up that conversation, again, in an intelligent, sophisticated way, because you got to sort of push those boundaries a little bit with folks so that you can get to more solutions, you can get to more resources. You talked about pushing people a little bit. Do you push your children, or did that come naturally to them when talking about these things?
So they were both so young when it happened. And
how old were your children when
Winnie was 3. She had turned 3 a week before. We had just celebrated her birthday. He'd gotten her a little bike and was teaching her how to ride it that whole week. And then my other Piper, she was 10 months old, so she wasn't even walking yet, you know. So I think because they were so young, it's come naturally just over time. They're very, just yesterday, they were asking me about the Titan situation.
The submersible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know what happened to the bodies, which is so taboo for the average 7 and 5-year-old. But my kids have seen their dad's body. They have seen the worst. And so I try and explain it in as developmentally appropriate ways as I can. I don't give them too much information. I've done that before, and it's, you know, affected Winnie especially. She's very sensitive. Piper could care less. She could not care less. She just like rolls her eyes and was like, whatever, Mom. But Winnie is very sensitive to that information. So sometimes I give her too much and it overwhelms her and we have to work through it. But I try to do it as appropriate as I can. And I feel like if they're old enough to ask the question, they're old enough to have at least some sort of an answer.
So you're brutally honest
Yeah.
with your children, even at a young age.
Yeah.
Do you think about, is there a line that you can't cross that you need to shield them from? Children can be innocent.
Yes.
Do you feel like there's a line that you don't want to cross?
Yes. I do feel like, unfortunately, my children's innocence was ripped away from them. And I don't blame Denny for that. I blame his abuser from his childhood for that, honestly, because I don't think we would be here had that not happened. So I do talk about, like, when people say Winnie is so wise and so mature, because she is. She is the most emotionally mature child you will ever meet. And I'm so happy about that, but I'm also sad. She shouldn't have to be. She should be able to be a kid. So, like, the average kid, if they're like, what happened to that submersible? I'm not going to go up and tell them all the information. But because my children have been exposed to stuff that they didn't have any control over, I didn't have any control over. But there have been things like just like a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, Winnie didn't fully understand. She understood that suicide meant that you feel like people don't love you. This is how she would explain it. Like, Daddy felt like he wasn't loved and like people didn't want him here anymore, even though we really wanted him here. And his brain wasn't working right. And so then he chose to die. And that's how she understood it. Just like 2 months ago, she put the pieces together and was like, oh, he actively did this. She still doesn't know the method, and she doesn't need to know yet. And she's told me, I'm not ready to know that. And I'm like, okay, when you and your therapist say that you're ready, then we'll have that conversation. But for now, you don't need to know that. And so there are things that I am cautious about talking about like that. And Piper still doesn't understand that. She just doesn't have the context for it yet. I think their little brains just cannot compute that yet. So,
Right.
yeah, it's just a little bit at a time. But I try and be as honest as I can without harming them.
So speaking of that honesty, talk to me a little bit about, you posted a video on social media, and I guess you didn't intend for it to blow up and go as viral as it did, but this thing just went everywhere.
Yeah.
Explain what the video was.
Okay, so Winnie is like she does not like making people sad. She's been pure sunshine since birth, like I said, and she pukes puppy dogs and rainbows. She is so sweet and happy. And so when we would go to the therapist's office, she wasn't gonna show her, she was having panic attacks all day, every day, like hyperventilating. Like, it was like hours and hours, like the majority of the day was spent with her hyperventilating, panic attacks.
And she's how old at this point?
3.
She's 3, okay.
So it's very overwhelming. He was a very involved, loving parent, and so it was very overwhelming for her. And it was sudden, because he wasn't even someone who like had a decline or anything, which, can happen with mental illness. It can kind of jump on you. There's always like a history, but there was no like separating himself. It was one day he was there, she woke up the next morning and he was gone. So she was having these panic attacks and hyperventilating all day, every day. And I'm trying so hard. I'm grieving, I'm struggling. I'm taking care of a 11-month-old baby at this point who is the clingiest baby in the world. And so I'm trying to do all these things, figure out bank accounts for my husband, just everything. And she's having panic attacks. And so I was like, I'm gonna take a video to show my therapist what it's like when she's actively in this so that she can help us handle it and know how to deal with it. So, and she had told me, like, when you're in those moments, if she is not like hurting herself or hyperventilating in the moment, if she's just crying, let her get it out, because of course she's mad, of course she's angry, of course she's devastated. She needs to get these emotions out, or it's going to come back to bite her in 10, 15 years. And so I would sit next to her and comfort her. But this one time I took a video to show our therapist. After I watched it a few times, I said, you know, this is like the most real, in your face view of what happens after suicide loss. And so I posted it on my own Facebook and Instagram, not even Instagram, just my own Facebook.
Just Facebook.
And to share with my friends and family and Denny's friends and family. And I said, this is what happens. Please fight to stay. Please do what you have to do. Please get help, because this is the reality that we're dealing with now. And it just blew up. And it didn't have like context or anything. So then people started like adding stories to it, but it just went crazy, and it was so impactful. And then since then, over the last 4 years, it's just continued to go viral every, 6 months or whatever.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit more? And we will post the link to to this video so that people can see it. And you're okay with that?
Yeah, it definitely.
Because it is out there.
Definitely trigger warning, but it's
yeah.
a really, I think it's, especially for someone who's struggling, it's a very because sometimes when someone's struggling, I mean, like I said, they're not thinking clearly. They need that shock to the system. And that has helped so many people to see, like, my kid would be like this.
Right. So we'll link it with your permission. But explain a little bit more, if you could, of what your daughter, an example of what your daughter was saying or doing.
So she was saying, like, in that video, and what she would say all the time is, like, I need daddy. I miss daddy. Daddy's gone. Daddy's not coming back. She understood that, unfortunately, at that point, it had been 3 months. So she knew he wasn't coming back at this point, and could see how clear that was. And so she was, having all the real grieving emotions as much as a 3-year-old can, and was talking about how much she wants her daddy back and how she wants her dad to hold her.
Right. Do you have any regret for putting that video up? Would you do it again if given the same opportunity? Have you thought about that? Are you glad? Has it spurred conversation and education in your mind? Where are you on that as you look back on posting that video? And again, you didn't intend for the world to see it. You intended for your friends and family to see it initially.
Yeah. It's hard because, like, TikTok wasn't like a thing back in 2019.
Right.
It was a thing, but not really.
Not like it is today.
No,
right.
We didn't really use it. So, like, when a video went viral, it was like 1 million views. And so, like, and now on TikTok, you got to get like 10 million views to really be, considered viral. And so it's, I feel conflicted about it, because I feel like I did put my child out there in a very vulnerable moment. And I'm conflicted about how I feel about that, because I'm sad that she has to be the example to the rest of the world. But I'm also grateful that we are in the situation that we're in. Because we're in the situation we're in, we're able to help people. So it's conflicting. It's like, I'm so glad. I do believe it has encouraged education and help. And I still get messages almost daily about it has saved my life. And the last time it went viral, it was men recording their reactions to the video.
Wow.
Grown men just sobbing, like hundreds and hundreds of men, and just like stitching it together with the video. And that was, I think that really helps people. It feels a little exploitative sometimes when people steal it and take it, but at the same time, I'm grateful for the conversations that it's causing people to have.
And for those people that are unfamiliar, I think what you're talking about is when a video like that goes as viral as it does, people will steal it, they will post it as their own, and then it can go viral on their platform, and so it really just literally goes everywhere. And at that point, it can go out of the context of what you initially intended it to do. Correct?
People make it sound different than it is, or they don't add resources for people or whatever, and that's frustrating.
Right. Let me ask you, how are your children doing today?
They are awesome. Winnie has struggled the last couple months after trying to put together in her mind what suicide really is. She talks right now a lot about how she's mad at her dad, which I think is very valid and healthy of her to feel right now. But overall, she's like she's processing her emotions. She's growing. She's in a musical theater camp this week. She's like the favorite kid in the class. Every time she'd walk into class, literally the entire class would get up and cheer Winnie. Like, everybody loves her. She's doing amazing. Piper is, like I said, she doesn't have as much awareness of it because she was so little when it happened. All she's ever really known is just having a mom and daddy being gone. And so I think it will be harder for her as she gets older to sort of understand that. But she is just the most, like, stubborn, strong-minded, strong-willed, get it done, passionate child who, like, inspires me to be, I want to be more like her when I grow up, basically.
Wow.
They're both just amazing, and they're doing great overall. We're still in therapy, but they're doing amazing.
And how is Dani Bates doing today?
Today is good. Some days, Father's Day was rough. It's up and down. I go through really good times and really bad times, and I'm pretty open about that on my social media with people because I think people think it's been a year or two. Oh, she should be remarried by now. Oh, she's fine by now. She's got it figured out. And, like, I'm still a mess some days, and while most days are good and okay, I'm still struggling with the loss that we had and how it has impacted my rest of my life. I will think about it every single day for the rest of my life, and it will impact every single day for the rest of my life.
Right. And so I think you've been open and honest in talking about how therapy helps with that.
Mm-hmm. A ton.
And so
meds are great when you need them. So it's, between medication therapy and my own children, that's what's saved my life. I probably wouldn't be here after what I've been through had I not had those three things.
Wow. I think there's statistics out there to show that if an immediate family member dies by suicide, someone in that family also has a higher likelihood of dying by suicide as well. Is that part of the reason of why you are so open and honest with yourself and with your children and your family because of the experience that you went through?
1,000%. My biggest fear in my life is losing one of my children to suicide. I could not bear it. I could not survive it. I just know it. And it's a huge fear of mine. And I know the statistics. I'm very, like, logically brained. And so reading, right after Denny died, I went all in on researching suicide. I've seen all the research. I know that statistically speaking, my kids should be screwed. Like, they should be messed up for the rest of their lives. They do not have a good outlook. And so I'm determined to do everything in my power to prevent that from happening. And I have been from day one, and I will continue to, even if it's terrifying. And if talking about that helps people and helps my kids and helps, all of our friends and family. I've had people who were not even super close to Denny tell me that his suicide, started some sort of suicidal thoughts inside of them. It is like a ripple effect. It really is. They call it a contagion. It really is contagious in a way. And so you have to be so aware and so open and really talk about it. That's the only way you can save lives.
Do you feel like your children would be open and honest enough with you to maybe tell you that they are having, so if they do have those thoughts run through their mind?
I really hope so. I'm doing everything that I can to, you never know, especially with the amount of trauma they've been through. That's a lot for a little kid. You don't know for sure. I can't predict the future, but I really hope so. And whatever I can put my hands on to read or to, do or to be actively helping them, I'm gonna do it because I would do anything to help them. So
right.
Yeah.
You may see this a lot in things that you post. If there are critics or people out there that would say, why are you so open and honest, and why do you talk about these uncomfortable things with people that are so young? Obviously, no one's going to tell a parent how to parent.
Yeah.
But do you see some
Well, people tell me how to parent all the time.
Do
I
they?
just don't listen to it.
Do they really? I
Oh,
mean,
all the time.
you get the criticism and
Oh, yeah.
teaching you how, or telling you how to parent your own kids.
From the beginning, I've been told by many people, hundreds and hundreds, that I should lie to them, that I shouldn't tell them, that this is too horrifying for them. One person literally seriously told me to tell them he joined the circus. They're like, I don't care what you have to say, but don't tell him what happened. And I just feel like that's the exact opposite of what I should do. And yeah, I get told how to parent all the time. I get told how to talk to my kids about it. I get told that I'm too open and that I should stop talking about it, and that me talking about it is just attention seeking or whatever. And I just ignore the haters.
Right. I call them the
kids would
keyboard
say.
warriors. There's a lot of times on social media they'll come out and they'll type something.
Yes. The
And-
large majority is supportive, but there
Sure.
are always, especially when you're talking about a controversial topic, there are going to be a lot of people who are very uncomfortable and get very mad about it.
I've found in my experience that engaging with people like that, there's just no winning. You try to reason and you can't reason. There's just no winning. There's no
Yes.
reason. Do you ever engage?
There are certain times, I think I've gotten to a point where I can tell by their comment if they're genuinely willing to hear me out or not. So there are occasions where I'll like, if someone says something dumb on one of my TikToks, I'll respond to that comment, not for that person, but so other people can get the education. I definitely use it for like a learning experience for other people a lot of the times, but most of them I just delete, I just ignore, I just block. There's no point in it. They don't understand what I'm trying to do, and they unfortunately are going to have to learn the hard way.
Yeah.
I hope they don't have a close loss to them. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
I hope that that's not how they have to learn.
Right. What do you think Denny's legacy is?
Oh man. That's a hard one. I think if you were to ask someone who's just like watched our journey, they would say, like, talk about how wonderful of a dad Denny was and how amazing of a partner he was to me. I think that's the primary thing they would say. And then just how fun and light and silly and goofy everything. He, like, for holidays, he would go all out on every holiday. On anything that could be celebrated, he would celebrate. He just made life so fun and joyful despite all that he had been through. And I know it ended in tragedy, but I still think that looking at how he got through those things and did have the 5 happiest years of his life with me and with his kids, I hope that's his legacy.
Yeah.
And I hope that inspires people.
It sounds like, from what you've told me, through some of your advocacy work too, sharing his story and sharing your family's experience and talking about the uncomfortable, it sounds like he has saved people's lives from some of the responses that you've gotten.
Yes, and it's like there's positive and negative with that. I hate that his entire identity is sort of wrapped up in suicide sometimes, because there was so much more to him than that. And so when I talk about it a lot, there is a focus on him dying of suicide, and it's like I said, my mom died a year before of cancer. That's not what people talk about when they talk about my mom. They don't talk about her lung cancer. And so while I think it's important to advocate, I hope that people see the goodness that Denny had, and that he was like kind of a jerk, but also funny, and he was so loved by all the people around him. I hope that people get that from it too, not just I'm grateful that people choose to live because of his story.
Yeah.
But I hope that they see the goodness that he was too.
Yeah.
That's important to me.
I want to be careful in how I say this, because I'm thinking of using the word selfish. Do you hear that it could be a selfish act? You know,
All
and
the
when
time.
we compare, if you can compare, someone that does die by cancer, maybe it's not a quote unquote, and I'm using air quotes, choice, versus someone that dies by suicide. Some people might say it's a choice, but I think people need to remember there's an illness that is many times associated with someone that dies by suicide, and that's not a choice, correct?
I mean,
and so, like, society, they don't or they compare the two
Yeah.
unfairly.
Yeah. 99 times out of 100, this person has struggled with mental illness for a long time, has severe mental illness, and we know that their brain literally doesn't work right. They literally don't have the right chemicals going to the right place and the right neurotransmitters and whatever. Their brain is not functioning the right way. So is it a choice for a delusional brain? Like, his brain was not thinking straight. Of course, he never would have done it in a million years if his brain was working properly. In the moment, he was having severe PTSD, so of course that made sense to him. And I've said this from the first day it happened, from the day that the police came and knocked on my door, that he believed he was saving his children. He believed he was stopping the cycle of abuse. He believed that somehow he was protecting his children, even though it was delusional and his brain was not functioning properly. That's what he believed. So I think it's the opposite of selfish, but I also think it was a dumb way to help us. And so I don't think he's like a hero in that sense, but I think that was his brain's way of being like, I'm going to try really hard to help these people that I love so much and would do anything to protect.
How do you think we get to a world where people would look at someone who passes away because of cancer versus someone who dies by suicide?
Yeah, I honestly think it's just talking about it. I think talking about Denny's life helps people a lot to understand his background, to understand the abuse he endured, to understand how much he'd progressed over the years, to understand how PTSD works and how it can, in an instant, make your brain stop functioning the right way, and you're like thinking things that do not make sense and are not real. I think all of those things, and just talking about it, is the way to get all of that information out. I think people have to be willing to listen to people like me. There are some weirdos like me who are willing to share our story openly and take advantage of that. Ask me the questions. Be in my face about it. I'm okay with that. I want to talk about it. And if it helps you understand it a little bit better so that you can help your kid or your sibling or your whatever, then that heals my heart a little bit, and it heals my daughter's hearts a little bit every single time a life is saved from our story.
And that kind of brings us back full circle, talking about, being comfortable about talking about the uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Do you think that it would take people different amount of time after an experience, after a suicide, to get to that point where they feel comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's
talking about the uncomfortable.
I think it's totally depends on the person. There are some people who are never comfortable talking about it, and that's okay too. My brain doesn't work the same way theirs does. My life story is different than theirs, and that's okay. That's okay. But that's why people need to take advantage of the people like me who are willing to talk about it. Listen to us. Hear us out. Not just me. There's lots of people out there who are willing to talk about it and are open about it. And I think that that'll help everybody. But I don't think we can blame people for never talking about it or taking 10 years to talk about it or whatever. I think it's different for everybody.
It's different for everybody. If people are interested, Dani, in hearing and seeing more of your story, because you still share things, even to this day, where can people find you?
On Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. And
drop a couple of the handles, and we'll also link them as well.
My Facebook is just Dani Bates. My Instagram is at Dani.Bates. And my TikTok is at DA Bates Fam.
Okay.
That's what I could get.
We'll link them too, and that's DANI and BATES, yes. Correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Resources as well. How important is it for people to get resources?
So important. Just the 988 is so important. I know that it can be hard to reach out, but they even have like a texting service. So if you go onto the website and look at it, that's a way. And just even if you have not struggled with suicidality, knowing the information and having resources, I promise every single person listening to this has someone in their close circle who's struggling with suicidal issues. It's 100%. Can totally guarantee it.
And they may be bottling it up, and the family and friends may not even know.
Yep. So you having access to that information and being open and being willing to share that could literally save someone's life.
What would you say, based on your experience, and your family's experience, what would you say to someone that has a suicidal thought today?
It's really hard because there's so many things I wish I could have said to Denny. I wish he would have told me how he was feeling in that moment, because I feel like I could have. I know I probably couldn't have at that point, but I wish I could have talked to him and tried to convince him. But I hope that people will realize that they are loved even if their brain is telling them that they're not. They are needed even if their brain is telling them that they're not. And each person has something to contribute. And even if you haven't found that thing yet, don't give up hope yet. Get the help. There is hope. I have struggled with suicidality, and I'm here having a happy life, loving my kids. My kids are amazing. We're having a good, happy life, even after all I've been through, and even with struggling with my own stuff after Denny died. And I know that it's possible to recover. And there are so many resources out there. Therapy is amazing, and you can usually get therapy with your insurance and medications, and there's so much. And you have friends and family who will support you. Sometimes you just have to open up to a couple of people to get to the right person who can support you.
Or maybe listen to somebody that has gone through an experience like this.
Yeah.
Well, Dani Bates, thank you very much for sitting down with us today. And honestly, you pushed me. You pushed me out of a comfort zone that I've never really been outside before. 100% honestly.
Sorry.
So no, it's good.
No,
I think it's good.
Thank you. I
so
appreciate that.
Thank you for pushing me. I hope that you will continue to push others as well in the right direction.
Yeah.
And thanks for talking today and being comfortable talking about the uncomfortable today. We really do appreciate your time and sharing your story. So thank you again. So this has been Utah State of Mind. I am your host, Jim Spiewak, and thanks again, Dani.